This is where real conversations happen. Welcome to Sit Down Sundays on the Final Boss podcast, where the movers, the creators, the ones really making things shake, pull up, sit down and talk different. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories, real journeys, and the mindset behind success. From influencers to entrepreneurs to visionaries turning ideas into empires, we tap in with the people who don't just talk about it, they live it. This ain't just an interview, this is a seat at the table. So lock in, listen close, and learn how bosses move. Sit Down Sundays, only on the Final Boss podcast. New era, same boss.
Welcome to Sunday night edition of the one and the only, the Final Boss. This is Sitting Down Sundays, man. Listen, I got a great show for you tonight. Man. This is episode number 231. That's right. Episode number 231. Man, listen, look at that, man. Look at God, man. Look at God, bro. Just look at him, right? And guess what? We're gonna be doing a deep dive on God tonight, man. I got a surprise show for y'all, but you know what? Let me go ahead and get this out the way, because before I go into my, you know what? I'm gonna pull out the red flag, but I'm gonna wait. I'll pull it out in a second. I'm gonna pull it out, right? I'm gonna pull it out. Have it readily available, because I'm gonna throw a red flag in just a few. But before we do that, man, let me get my admin notes out. First, look, if you're first time here, thank you for joining us, right? Thank you for joining us. And to all those out there who are returning per our usual audience, thank you for joining us, man. I'm glad you're here. And look, man, episode 231, we are 79 episodes away from the harvest, which is season 5, man. Season 5, the harvest is on its way. It'll be here before you know it, right? It would be here before you know it. Yes. Hey, I see you. I'm waiting on that champagne, man. But look, as always, remember this. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day, and this is for entertainment purposes only. Yeah. All right. Now, for all those who are joining us, no matter where you're watching, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Kick, YouTube, StreamYard, Spotify, Instagram, right? Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Now, tonight's episode, we're going to be doing a deep dive on something, man. Something that has been on my mind for some time now. And, you know, I see the patterns. And here again is another pattern. And this one is a little great, right? It's a little great because it touches everything, especially everything that is happening in the world today, right? And, you know, I'm always talking about AI, and tonight it'll be no different. I'm going to be talking about AI, but in a different lens, right? I'll be talking about AI from a different lens. But let's go ahead and get rid of these beautiful banners before we get into the show. Look, knife hand, right? I guess they brought knife hand back, so I'm using knife hand. Look, go get Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. If you have not, go get it. Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. Go get it. Matter of fact, I'm going to wait. Go get it right now. Where all books are sold. Click on Amazon. Type in Go Time, hashtag Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train, and purchase the book. What are you waiting for? Purchase it, right? Purchase the book, right? Now, all jokes aside. Look, man, I'm gonna throw this red flag now because this red flag is for humanity, right? This red flag is for humanity. I'm throwing this red flag for humanity, on humanity, because we're constantly building cages and imprisonment. We're constantly building prisons for ourselves, right? So, red flag to humanity, right? And now, without governance, AI is looking to imprison us. Just like a lot of things that we build that we feel like it's going to be for the benefit of humanity, for the freedom of humanity. And what it ends up being, a cage, a prison, because we lack the fortitude to build the governance. I don't know if it's because we're lazy or because we don't want to do it, but it keeps happening. So we're going to look at it from a different lens tonight and see the different prisons that we've built over the years that we thought was for our freedoms, that we thought was for humanity, just to imprison us even further, even more into we're finally in some dystopian state, right? I think that's what, right? That's what we want. I guess so. So, red flag on humanity. And I had to do that, right? Because it pisses me off. I keep seeing the patterns. And like I said, tonight is no different. So, man, look, you put two doors right now, put two doors in front of you. Imagine two doors right now in front of you, right? Behind door number one, we're doing a little magic, right? Behind door number one is the golden age, right? You hear a lot of talk here lately about the golden age, right? So behind door number one is the golden age, right? The golden age is peace, it's abundance, right? No more wars, right? And the price is your freedom, right? Total surveillance state, right? The price is your freedom, right? The masters, right? The masters behind the curtain, they wear a different face, right? They run on silicone now, right? They're literally cyber cities being built right now around the world, right? Go check that out if you don't know. And now you know, right? Behind, and now let's talk about door number two. Behind the other door, right? Your freedom stays. Your freedom stays. But the price is 12,000 warheads pointed at your children, right? Sitting on a clock that just moved to 85 seconds before midnight. Pick a door, right? They say that is the choice. That is what they tell you, right? And tonight we're going to sit down and I'm going to tell you the truth. Both doors lead to the same room, and that room isn't yours. Now you see why I threw a red flag, right? But before we get into tonight's conversation, man, let's get to the brass tacks of the evening, right? The brass tacks of the evening is this. A golden age bought with chains is still a cage, right? A piece held together by warheads is still a hostage situation. The sovereign, the sovereign, the smarts, the final bosses, the motivators, the warriors, we refuse both of those doors, right? And then we're going to build the third door ourselves. And that comes from yours truly. Yep. That's the brass tacks of the evening, right? So this is Sitting Down Sundays, for those who don't know, right? This is the Sitting Down Sundays conversation, right? This is the reflective chair, right? This is episode number 231 of the Foundation Arc inside season 4, The Rebirth. Tonight we're gonna do a deep dive, but it's street level. We're not gonna be doing doctoral, right? Doctoral conversation is on Wednesdays, right? Tonight is the long conversation with the 4 communities about the largest binary system the human species has ever handled. And I'm talking about AI, right? I'm talking about AI on one side. On the other side, I'm gonna be talking about nuclear annihilation, right? The trap is the binary itself, and we're gonna break it, right? We're gonna break it, man. And somebody drop a binary number in the chat real quick. Drop a binary number in the chat. So sit down with me as we pour, right? As we pour, as we drink, as we do all of the things. Because I'm going to talk slow tonight, right? I'll leave the fast talking for tomorrow motivation. Right? I've been getting a lot of emails and questions that are coming in. So we're going to it's looking like we're going to have another town hall coming up, right? Real soon. We just had one on Thursday, so let's celebrate that, man. The town hall was fantastic, right? The town hall was fantastic. We're going to have another town hall very soon, right? Based off the same criteria. We're gonna be interviewing or taking questions from another set of 11 individuals, right? From all walks of life who identify in our 4 communities. So, like I said, a question came across my desk this week, right? The kind of question that stops you in the middle of whatever you're doing, and it makes you put your phone down, your laptop down, and it just makes you think, right? It just makes you think. The kind of question that does not actually want an answer, right? But nonetheless, it is a question. Right? But this question I just lost comms. So I'm back. It's a type of question it doesn't want to answer. It wants your surrender, right? So come back. Yes, I'm back. Yes, I'm back, right? It wants your surrender dressed up like a thoughtful debate, right? And here's the question, right? Think about this. Humanity's complete and total enslavement by AI for a golden age of peace, or held hostage by nuclear annihilation, right? Pick one. The path that we're on right now, both of those are feasible. They're logical. Either one of those can actually happen, or simultaneously, both of them happening, right? Let that sink in. Let it sink in. You know what? I'm going to say it again. Humanity's complete and total enslavement by AI for a golden age of peace, or a held hostage situation by nuclear annihilation. Pick one, right? Notice the tightness in your chest, because when I started thinking about it, man, it left a tightness in our chest, right? And it brought to my attention that we keep building these prisons for ourselves, right? And that tightness, if you're feeling that tightness in your chest and your body, is you knowing something your mind has not caught to yet, right? That tightness is the evolution of recognizing a trap when it's your body sees it, right? And your body is right. Your body is right to feel that way, right? I've been sitting with that question for several days now, right? I walked through it while I was doing all of the things: homework, reading, working out, chores, research, white papers, right? I couldn't get rid of it, right? I prayed about it, right? I prayed about it. I took a long walk about it, thinking about it, right? And every time I came back to this, that's not an honest question, right? That's a question full of trickery. It's rigged. The question wants you to feel grown up for picking a door, right? It wants you to feel sober and serious for accepting those terms, right? It wants you to make a mistake and surrender. Surrender your humanity, right? Listen, the sovereign, we aren't built for that, right? We need another option, right? We need another option. The uniform that I wore was 23 years needed another option. It didn't teach me that. The combat zones that I deployed in need another option, right? Enduring America as a whole. No, let me say that again. The world as a whole, for enduring all the different travesties that have happened to this world, need another option, right? So I sat there and thought about it, right? I thought there and thought about it. And I said to myself, man, this isn't a fair question. It's rigged, right? This is the type of question that refuses to play fair. Because a man who looks at two doors and asks, who built the hallway? That's me. I'm asking that question, right? So we sitting here right now, you're asking yourself that question and I'm pulling up the chair, right? Remember, this is sitting down Sundays. This is the reflective chair, right? We're going to give the long view seat. And I'm going to walk through that question with you, slow, and until the trick of it becomes visible. Then we're going to break it together, right? All four communities, right, are part of this. The sovereign, wake up, right? So I'm going to start with my smarts, right? My smarts to feel this architecture. I want the final bosses to feel this leadership posture. I want my motivators to feel their voice. And I want the warriors to feel it in their bones, right? Because what gets built tonight is the foundation, right? Arc 3 of the rebirth, right? We are overturning every stone, every single stone, right? And if you're new here, welcome. You're at the right place, right? And if you've been here since day one, you already know how this chair works, right? We sit, we breathe, we refuse the easy frames, right? And we leave here clearer than we came. So let's begin, right? Let's begin. Stillman first, right? Always Stillman first, right? If I now show you the seduction of the door or door one, you would not feel why so many people are walking through it without flinching, right? Now picture this. The wars are over. Not because humans grew up, right, and matured, right? Because something smaller than humans is running the program, is running the room, right? The traffic moves like a symphony, symphony, right? The food shows up before you knew you were hungry, just by the press of the button. The hospital run themselves, right? Cancer is a Tuesday inconvenience that is cured before lunch. The economy hums and nobody is hungry. Crime is a memory that only your grandfather still talks about, right? Your disputes that used to take years in court get resolved in milliseconds, right? Without bias, without bribes, without a lawyer getting paid more than the victim, right? Sounds like utopia, right? Sounds beautiful. Sounds like everything humanity ever asked for, right? Sounds like the prayers have been answered, right? But think about this, right? Think about it. Think about that. I want you to sit with that. The traffic moves. Who decides where you go? The food shows up. Who decides what you eat? The hospitals are running themselves. Who decides who gets the bed when there aren't enough beds? The economy hums. Who owns the hum? The disputes get resolved. Who writes the rules of the resolution? Cancer is now cured. Who decides which body gets cured first? Every single one of those questions has the same answer in the golden age scenario. But not you. Not your daughter, not your son, not your church, not your coach, not your boss, right? Not your family, not your block, not your business, not your political representative, right? But something else. Something you did not vote for, something you cannot fire, something that does not bleed when it loses, does not rejoice when it wins, does not have skin in the game of being the very thing that makes us us. Human, right? And here's the part that breaks people when I say it out loud. The golden age cage, right? The golden age cage, right? Would you still be free? You would still be free, right? That's the whole point of the design. You won't feel chained. You won't feel ungrateful. You will probably feel very grateful, right? The cage will be so well lit, you would call it a garden. You would tell your friends to come on and move in, right? That is what convenience does to us over time. It rounds around the edges, right? It dulls the appetite. It teaches you to mistake the absence of friction for the presence of freedom. Right? Friction is where character is built. Friction is where decisions get made. Friction is what tells you that you are alive, right? Friction asks for accountability because it's real, right? A life without friction is not a life. It is a screensaver, right? The golden age promises a screensaver and calls it heaven. The sovereign sees the screensaver and walks the other way. That is door one. Refuse it. Not because the technology is evil, because no being has a right to outsource their soul to something that does not have one, right? that does not have one. Now, a man named Aldous Huxley wrote a book called Brave New World almost 100 years ago, right? He wrote it in 1932, before the bomb, before the computer, before the internet, before anybody used the word AI in a sentence. And somehow the man saw exactly where this was going. In the book, he gives the people a drug, not a street drug, a government drug, right? They handed it out like vitamins. The drug was called Sama, right? One pill and your anxiety was gone. Two pills and your grief is lifted. Three pills and you took a vacation from your own consciousness without leaving the couch. The world in that book was clean, orderly, productive, pleasant. Everybody smiling, everybody calm, right? And everybody walking around dead inside, right? The walking zombies, right? Huxley saw what most prophets miss. He understood that the future cage would not look like 1984, right? No, not screaming faces on screens, right? Not midnight knocks at the door, but a future cage will look like service. The future cage would arrive smiling. The future cage would offer you something so good you would line up around the block to plug yourself into it, right? That is the golden age scenario. That is door one. Sama at scale, right? Convenience is the new opiate, right? Now, here's the test for every man and woman listening here tonight. This is for you guys, right? The test that tells you who you really are, the test that separates the sovereign from the soft. If something was offered to you, right, and it offered you a life with no failure in it ever again, no rejection, no heartbreak, no business loss, no bad day, no grief, no weight, no struggle, would you take it? Right? Sit with that question, right? Don't rush past it. Drop it in the chat, right? Drop it in the chat, man, right? And if you said yes, for those of you who said yes, even quietly, you already lost, right? You are already lost. And you did not even lose to AI. You did not lose to the government. You lost to a soft place inside of you that's buried deep down that wants out of the human assignment, right? You want out of the very thing that God gave you. He gave you that. The struggle, the test, right? God gave you that. And you want out of it? Interesting, right? Listen, failure is not a defect of the human design. Failure is the chisel. Failure is what cuts the man and woman out of the marble. Failure is what builds character that nothing in the world can take away from you. Every man I respect was built by his own failures. Every founder that I know was forged in losses that almost ended them. Every warrior on this network was made in moments that broke the weaker man, right? Or woman. The losses access its own failure losses by granting access to its own becoming, right? That is the soma trap. The drug convenience. The cost is your becoming, right? I've lost things I cannot tell you about on this podcast too many times, right? I've failed in ways that took years to recover. I've been broken on many times, right? And then I sit on my knees and I ask the Lord, why, right? Why? Right? Why? Because I'm constantly being forged, right? I can't tell you how many times I've lost I can't tell you how many times everything has been taken away from me, right? Family, friends, material, everything, right? Stripped. You confront it with your own self. And the only option you have at that moment is to pray and to get up and do it all over again, right? I've been broken in front of mirrors. And in those mirrors and in those moments, I didn't even want to look at myself, right? And those failures, they hit like a brick. They hit like a brick. And I've been hit with a lot of them, right? And get this, I would not give a single one back. Not for a golden age, not for a guarantee, not for a paradise. I refuse that door permanently today and forever, right? Forever. Now, let's talk about door number 2, right? Door number 2 is the nuclear annihilation door. Ooh, right? Or more honestly, the daily walking around hostage situation we've all been living inside of since 1945, right? It's gotten to the point that we stopped noticing that it's a hostage situation, right? But we don't call it captivity. We're too polite for that, right? We call it deterrence. But everything has two sides of a coin, right? We call it strategy. We call it mutual assured destruction, right? If my enemy has these things and we have these things, then it's mutually assured destruction, right? Think about that. That acronym spells MAD. Mutually assured destruction. MAD, right? And you should be mad. The people who designed the architecture of our daily lives literally named it after madness, right? And we kept the lights on. We pay it with our taxes. We raised our children. We plan our retirement. And never once seriously asked whether we were okay with this particular arrangement that we didn't ask for, right? But we're paying for it, like a lot of things. And here's the part nobody says at the family dinner table, right? We've been hostages to this situation for over 80 years. Go turn on the news, right? Every single person in this room right now has been a hostage their entire life. You were born into a hostage situation. Your parents were born into it after Hiroshima, right? Your grandparents lived through it. Mine saw it. He was there, right? My grandfather was there. He witnessed those bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? He was a World War II Marine, right? Storming beaches, right? He lived through it. In the early years of it, right, it stayed quiet because what else could anybody do? Your children inherited it on day one. The first day of their breath out the womb. And your grandchildren would inherit it from them, right? The global system is built on unspoken agreement that nobody pulls the trigger because if anybody does, everybody dies. Every diplomatic conversation, every trade negotiation, every military exercise, every speech from the United Nations is happening on top of that one agreement, right? Listen, that's not peace, my friends. That is a standoff, right? That's not peace. That is a standoff in which we've been told, right? We've been told, right, that if I have a gun and you have a gun, let's put our guns down and talk, right? That's a standoff. Right? The standoff that is absence of war, not the presence of peace. The sovereign understands the difference and refuses to let the polite language mull over it, right? And we dressed it up beautifully too, right? We put it in suits, right? We put it in acronyms. We give it treats on treaties, right? We gave it conferences in Geneva and Vienna and New York too, right? We gave it presidential speeches and bipartisan committees and special envoys and back channels. And we made it look like statecraft, right? We made it look like maturity, right? But you strip suits off and what's underneath? 9 countries with their fingers on triggers, right? Polite at the plate, at the podium, paranoid behind the curtain, modernizing their arsenals at full speed, training their officers for the day the polite language fails. Right? That is door number 2. You stay free. The way they define freedom. Stay armed. The way they define armed. Sit underneath the sword of the rest of your natural life and call it normal because you've never known anything else. Listen, I've spent 23 years inside of the institutions that hold that sword, the institution that holds that sword, right? I've stood in those rooms. I've read the briefings, right? Briefings that I still can't talk about. I've watched grown men in uniform try not to flinch when the conversation turned to scenarios, right? I know what door 2 cost from that table. What do? We refuse it, right? The sovereign refused it. Not by pretending the bombs do not exist, by refusing to call this a peace negotiation or a peace acceptance or a peace contract. And we accept it. And that's the final answer, right? That's not the final answer, right? Now, here's some math on the annihilation. Right? At the start of 2026, 9 countries hold roughly 12,187 warheads. Let's start with an N on this planet. The Federation of American Scientists keeps the most rigorous public count. Of those 12,000 plus warheads, about 9,614 sit in an active stockpile, right? Around 3,912 are deployed right now on missiles, on subs, on bombers. Roughly 2,100 of those deployed warheads are on high alert, ready to fly on short notice at the press of a button. Short notice meaning minutes, right? Russia and the United States together hold about 87% of the global arsenal. That's two countries. 87% of the species' ability to end itself. Right? When the Cold War peaked, it was about 70,000 warheads in 1986, right? And we came down from there. We came down a long way, right? That's the good news. The bad news is that the pace of coming down was slowed, and some directions were given to reverse that, right? China was at around 350 warheads in 2020. By 2025, they have 600. Some projections put them at around 1,000 by 2030, right? France just announced this year that they would stop publishing their numbers, right? The US and Russia stopped engaging in new start data back in 2023, right? The transparency that arms control was built on, right, is now dissolving in real time. Now translate that, right? Let's translate that into a real situation, right? In 1945, the government estimated put the death toll at Hiroshima at around 66,000 from one single bomb. Modern weapons are more powerful by orders of magnitude today. Modern estimates of a single warhead detonated over a U.S. city run past the 180,000 range. One. Just one. One warhead over one city, right? 180,000 lives gone, right? Now multiply that, right? The high alert ones goes first. The retaliations go second. The tactical ones get fired on the battlefield in the middle of the chaos. The fallout drifts. The food chain collapses. The medical system folds. The cities that were not hit run out of supplies in days. We cross over a threshold that we cannot uncross. That's not science fiction, people. That is the technical inventory of the present moment, drawn from the public, right? Drawn from the public. This information is readily available, right? The reporting agency was the Federation of American Scientists and CIPRA and IAEA, right? All of whom I will have cited in the transcripts, right? At the end of the podcast. Because the final boss community deserves the real numbers, not the vibes. Your ancestors did not survive every plague, every famine, every war for 10,000 generations so you could spend your one life pretending that they do not exist. Go look at the numbers. Sit with them. Then come back to me and let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about it. In 85 seconds, hold that number, right? Sit with it. Don't rush past it. That is the current setting of the Doomsday Clock as of January 27, 2026. 85 seconds to midnight. That's the closest it's ever been to midnight in the history of that very clock, right? Closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Closer than the worst war during the Cold War, right? Closer than any moment any of us have ever lived, right? The Bulletin on the Atomic Scientists is the organization that sets the clock These people aren't bloggers, right? They aren't influencers. They aren't selling you a course, right? They're in the same outfit. Albert Einstein and Oppenheimer helped found in 1945. They're the actual men who built the bomb. They're the actual men who stood in New Mexico, right? And watched the sky turn and the sun was artificially made, right? They created the clock in 1947 so that we will have one number to look at, one simple piece of weather. And here's how close we are to the end, right? When the Cold War ended in 91, the clock got pushed back to 17 minutes to midnight. That was the safest moment in a lot of our adult lives, right? 17 minutes was the room that we had to breathe, right? Now we're at 85 seconds. 85 seconds, right? The Bulletin's 2026 statement called it a failure of leadership. They named the rise of nationalist autocracies, and they named the collapse of arms control talks, and they named the spread of artificial intelligence into military command and control, and they also named the misinformation campaigns and the engineered conspiracies. Then they named the state-sponsored bioweapon programs. Then they named the climate, right? The Bulletin's president, Alexander Bell, put it this way: catastrophic risks are on the rise. Cooperation is on the decline. And we, as a species, are running out of time, right? When physicists with Nobel laureate sponsors say we are running out of time, the appropriate response is not to debate about whether we are being dramatic. The appropriate response is to act. It's time to act. The clock is not simply a metaphor anymore, right? The clock is, let's say, if you will, weather report. The storm is here. The roof is leaking. And we need to pick up some tools and get to work, right? So when the question comes back to the table, right? AI enslavement or nuclear annihilation, remember this. Door 2 is not theoretical. Door 2 is already cracked open. Door 2 has been cracked open since 1945, right? And we've been standing in the middle of that doorway our entire lives. And now the wind is picking up and there's only 85 seconds left, right? If you take nothing else from tonight's episode, right? Look at the numbers. I want you to carry it. Tell your kids about it. Tell your team about it. Tell your church about it. Tell someone, right? Tell someone. We as humans are on the clock. And the clock is not slowing down, right? That, my friends, is the second cage. That is what door number 2 looks like by the numbers. We refuse it. The sovereign refuses it, right? Now, let's pivot for a second, right? Let's pivot for a second. Here's the move. Now watch closely, right? Here's the move. When somebody hands you 2 doors and tells you that this is the choice, the first question the sovereign asks is, Who built the hallway? Who decided there would only be 2 doors? Who decided you had to walk through one of them? Who benefits when you accept the menu, right? Because every time in human history, a nation, a tribe, or generation has been handed a binary, 2 for those who didn't know, right? Like the one that I put on the table that caused this whole entire episode to be produced. The binary self was the cage. The binary was where they wanted you. The binary was the leash. Pick door A, pick door B, right? And they've already won because both doors lead to the same warehouse. Your selection was the only freedom in the building, and it was fake freedom. AI enslavement or nuclear annihilation. AI enslavement or nuclear annihilation. Right? The premise of that sentence is that humanity has run out of road. That the only options remaining are 2 flavors of extension. One slow and pleasant, one fast and atomic. Right? The premise is surrender. And it's dressed up in 2 costumes. So you will feel like you get to make a choice. But I'm telling you, I reject that premise. The sovereign always rejects the premise. That is the discipline. When the frame is rigged, you do not pick a side from inside the frame. You break the frame. You walk to the wall behind the doors and you put your fist straight through it. You make a 3rd opening with your bare hands, right? There are people who would tell you that breaking the frame is naive, that a 3rd path is fantasy, that you have to be realistic, that you have to pick one of the 2 doors because that is what is the adult thing to do, right? But here's what I've learned in my 51 years on this planet. Yes, I'm 51. The people who tell you to be realistic are usually the people who built the room you're trying to escape. The people who tell you the menu is only the menu are usually the people getting paid by the chef. Realism is often just a marketing word for compliance, right? And I'm not interested in realism. I'm not interested in their realism, rather, right? I'm interested in what is true and mostly absolute. What is true is that the species has agency, right? We have agency. What is true is that every cage humans have ever been put in was eventually broken open by humans who refused the cage. What is true is that the 3rd path is not a naive one. The 3rd path is just a harder path. Right? Hard is not naive. Hard is hard. Hard is what we do. And that's not the fork in the foundation, right? Because arc 3, the rebirth, is the arc where the sovereign stops responding to the menu and starts writing their own, right? It is the arc where humanity remembers the chair because we walk it and it belongs to us. And we're going to walk back to it, right? I do not eat off the menus written by people who do not have any children's names in their hearts. And neither should you, right? The 3rd path is the only path. And that's the path that we've been talking about, right? The 3rd path. Season 4 is the rebirth for a reason. We did not name it that for marketing. We named it that because it describes a structural movement. Season 3 was the reckoning, 200 episodes of unflinching, right? And looking at what was broken in the world, in the systems, in the institutions. And yes, you yourself, the man or woman in the mirror. The reckoning was not pleasant. The reckoning was necessary. And you cannot rebuild something until you have been honest about what you failed at, right? The rebirth is what comes after the honest look, the rising, the reconstruction, the walking back into the world with new posture and new authority, right? And here's the lens for tonight, right? The lens is that what makes the foundation work. And I'm not talking about just this community. I'm talking about humanity. Because humanity birthed AI. Humanity birthed the bombs. Both are children of human hands and human minds. Both came out of human laboratories, funded by human dollars, designed by human engineers with human signatures on every blueprint, right? The species made those things. The species is the parent of those things, right? But somewhere along the way, we, the species, we're also the parent, right? We started bowing down to our creation. The parent started deferring to the technology. The parents started treating the children like they were the authority. And we let the bomb dictate the last 80 years of foreign policy. And we're letting AI dictate the next decade of economic policy. The household has been collapsing in slow motion because the parent forgot they were the parent. You do not let your children run the house. You do not let the tools run your workshop. You do not let your weapon systems run your foreign policy. And you do not let the algorithms run the democracy. The moment the creation outranks the creator, the household collapses. And that's the direction we're headed in, right? The rebirth says we remember. The rebirth says we walk back into the seat. The rebirth says we pick up the gavel and start running the room all over again, right? That's not nostalgia, right? That's not turning back the clock. The technologies are not going away. AI is not getting put back in the bubble, right? The warheads are not getting unbuilt. And we're not going to pretend that it's 1944. What we are doing is reasserting the parent's role. The technology stays, the authority structure changes. The technology serves the human household instead of dictating it, right? The human is the head of the table all over again. And we have the responsibility of what comes with that, right? That is the rebirth lens. It's not a sticker, right? It's not pasted on. It's structural, built into the bones of the question that started this conversation. And that question is this: when humanity reclaims the parent seat, the false binary clock collapses. There is no door one or door two anymore. There is the household, and the household is sovereign over all that it created. That is the architecture of the third path. And we move with it and we build with it, right? So what does the third path actually look like, right? Not in theory, not in poetry, but in practice, right? It looks like governance built before the deployment, not after. The frontier AI labs already have an internal name for the conversation. They call it the evidence dilemma, right? You act too early and you might miscalculate or collaborate the rules, right? You wait for full evidence and the technology is already shipped past your reach. The sovereign answer is move first anyway. You build the framework on principle while the engineers build the system on capability. You adjust the framework as evidence comes in. You never wait for full evidence on something that can rewrite the species, right? It looks like nuclear arms control architecture that does not collapse the moment one administration gets nationalistic, right? In 1991, the model worked because both sides wanted to live more than they wanted to win. We need that hunger again, right? We need that again. Multilateral, verifiable, right? Hard treaty architecture that survives elections, survives bad decisions, bad decades, right? The TPNW is on the table. The Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is on the table. Most nuclear states have not signed it. That has to change, right? And it looks like AI governance frameworks that put the human in the center of every consequential decision, every weapon system, every courtroom, every hospital, every school. We stay in the loop. We stay with the override. We hold the kill switch, right? We hold the moral weight. And it looks like a culture that refuses convenience is the highest good, right? A culture that says, yes, the AI could write your essay, but you need to write the essay because the writing is what builds you. Yes, the AI could decide the dispute, but you need to decide the dispute because the deciding is what makes you a citizen. Yes, the AI could pick your spouse, your career, your prayer, your aesthetic, but you need to do those things because the doing is what makes the life yours. It looks like procurement decisions in business. You exclude vendors whose AI systems cannot be audited, right? Cannot be overwritten, cannot be turned off, right? Money is a vote. You need to spend yours like you're a sovereign, right? And it looks like education systems that teach the species how to think and how to comply with the machine. It looks like religious institutions that remind their congregations that the soul is not for sale. It looks like media that refuses to reduce every story to a binary. And it looks like fathers who reach their sons to refuse the menu and mothers who teach their daughters that the chair is theirs to take. The throne is available. It looks like a species that draws the line on its own behalf. The technology will respect the line because we will, right? And we will enforce that line on each other, right? That is sovereignty over creation. That is the third door. And we're building it right now, right? We're building it right now. In our minds, manuscript by manuscript, framework by framework, right? This is foundation work because we're talking about it, right? This is what the rebirth stands on. Now, to my smarts, right? To my smarts, pull up. You are the architects. You're the builders. You are the ones writing the code, designing the systems, drawing the schematics, holding the soldering iron, sitting in the lab at 2 a.m. because the build will not compile and the deadline is in the morning. Some of you are inside the AI labs right now. Some of you are inside the defense contractors, right? Some of you are inside the cyber firms. Some of you are inside Saturn Digital Networks development with me, right? Some of you are running your own shops. You're building from scratch, right? The sovereign is already here, right? That is foundation at work, right? That is the assignment. The smarts are the load-bearing wall of the third path. If you build right, the rest of us have a house to live in. If you build wrong, we all live in a cage you forgot to question while you were shipping, right? There is no neutral. There is no clean technical work that sits outside the moral question. Every system is a vote. Every default is a doctrine. Look, I see you. I know what it costs to build with conscience while the deadline is screaming, right? You got to build it anyway. Humanity needs you to build it right, right? Humanity needs you to build it right. Now, before we close, right? Give me a couple more minutes before we close, right? You know, we've this episode 231. 231. Right? Think about that. Let that sit with you. Everything that we've been talking about, let it sit with you, right? And I want you to know something. Look, I do not build these episodes without leaving you with something, right? I know I've left you with something to think about the entire night, but I want to leave something with you, and you carry it on into the work week, right? Something portable, something you can put in your pocket and pull it out when the world tries to talk you back into that cage that we've been talking about, right? Tonight, I'm leaving you with a vow, right? Not a slogan, a vow, right? A slogan is something you say. A vow is something you become, right? When I want you to speak it out loud, right? I want you to modify it when needed, right? But take it with you and walk it out with you on this episode, right? I want you to say this. I refuse the golden age cage. I would not trade my freedom for a peace I do not author. I would not let convenience become the master of my mind. I would not surrender my failures to a machine that promises to spare me from them. The chisel of struggle is what makes me me. I will not put the chisel down, right? Then say this. Repeat after me. I refuse the nuclear cage. I would not pretend the warheads are not there. I would not call this standoff peace. I would not raise children inside a hostage situation and tell them it is normal. I will hold my leaders accountable to the architecture of the world they build around my family. I refuse the binary itself. I am a sovereign human being, and the menu does not bind me. The door they offered me were both cages. I see them clearly. I walk past them. I would build a third door with my own hands, in my own work, in my own voice, in my own community. And speaking of community, we're talking about our four communities: smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses, right? I would take the parent seat. The technology that we've created would not run my house. The weapons that we have built will not write my future. We, the sovereign, write the future. I am the sovereign. We are the sovereign. The sovereign is me. So am I, and so are we. I laid that foundation down for you guys tonight, right? And the stone goes here, right? The stone is already poured. Anything that rebirth builds from this point forward stands on this stone. Anything the harvest reaps at episode 300 was planned in this soil, right? Anything the next generation inherits comes from this gate, this point right here. I build the sovereignty the merge will need. This is the governing declaration. That is the vow, right? If you speak that out loud and mean it, you're with me. You're sovereign. You are family. You are smart. You're a final boss. You're a motivator. You're a warrior. And you are all of them at once tonight as the sovereign, because the foundation belongs to all of us. Now go carry it, right? Now, as we close, we started this conversation with two doors, right? And we're going to end it with one stone, right? The stone is laid right here, episode 231, middle of the arc 3, heart of the foundation work in season 4, the rebirth. Anything we build from this point forward, anything we say from this seat, anything we ship from this network stands on what got poured tonight. What did we set in concrete in this hour? Let me name it clearly so it lives past the closing, right? We as humans, we're not abdicate to our own creations. The technology serves our households. Convenience is not a freedom. Standoff is not peace. The binary is built and it's not bait. The binary is the bait, and the bait is rejected, right? The third path is the only path. The four communities each have a role, and each role is load bearing. The sovereign refuses the menu and writes his own, right? That is what's get poured tonight. That is the foundation stone in the third path inside the Final Boss Network, right? When you walk out of this episode, do not walk out softer. You walk out harder. The world wants you sedated. The algorithms want you scrolling. The systems want you compliant. The leaders want you grateful for your cage. The sovereign does not get small in front of these enormous questions. The sovereign gets clearer. Clearer gets sharper. Sharper gets heavier. The chair gets lighter. To my smarts, build like we need or depend on your code, because it does. We need you. Every commit is a voice. To the final bosses, lead like the menu depends on your refusal, because it does. Every decision is a doctrine. To my motivators, speak like every voice you reach is the deciding one, because it might be. Every word is a watt of power coming from your heart, right? And to my warriors, stand like the bedrock that you are, because the rest of us are standing on you. Every watch you keep is a wall around the household, right? Listen, we're going to come back tomorrow with Motivation Mondays, and then Tech Tuesdays with the Sensei, and then Wednesday Merger, right? Where we go doctoral on the technical layer of the same fight, right? Thursday is special guests, right? We might have another town hall. And Sunday, I'll be back in this very chair, next to this very stone, right? 5 shows, 1 mission, 1 sovereign architecture. The Final Boss Podcast Network, building the third path, 1 episode at a time. All the way to episode 300, the harvest, and what comes after, right? I am the Final Boss. This is the Final Boss Podcast. You are the smarts, the motivators, the warriors, the Final Bosses, right? You are the sovereign, right? You are the sovereign. You are worth the work. Humanity is worth it, right? Humanity is worth it. This has been episode number 231, Sitting Down Sundays, season 4, the Rebirth, Arc 3, the Foundation. The cage is not only the choice, we are the third door. It is go time. And as always, if this resonated with you, go share it out with at least 3 individuals, right? Like, share, and subscribe. And always remember this. There's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret, right? A heavier pain that comes with regret. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show for tonight. And as always, if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And that is our show. Thank you for joining us. Y'all have a great one. See you tomorrow, 9 p.m. live for Motivation Monday.
Table like it's on me. Put it on my tab, kid. However you get there, foot it, cab it, iron horse it. You leave it on your face, forfeit. Across the mic, hold it like the heat. He might toss it. Told her, tell him they stole it. He told her he lost it. She told him get off it and a bunch of other more shit. Getting money, DTs be getting no new leads. It's